Hey there, Shat on TV listeners. It's Gene Lyons. I'm here off a fresh recording of True Detective Season 3. Big D, the King Bee, and I have teamed up to cover that HBO hit series. And while you're waiting for Game of Thrones, Westworld, American Gods, or Taboo to come back, we feel you might enjoy this one. If you haven't watched it, what are you waiting for? Get on HBO, check out episodes 1 and 2 of True Detective Season 3, out now, and then enjoy this podcast. And if you like it, consider subscribing and write us a review. Just visit shatontv.com/subscribe. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you when your favorite show returns on Shat on TV. Welcome back to Shat on TV, True Detective, the unofficial podcast companion piece to the HBO series True Detective. I'm one of your hosts, Gene Lyons, and alongside me are my two co-hosts, Big D, Dick Ebert.
Good evening.
And the King Bee.
What the fuck is the right answer to that question?
And this is our deep dive episode where we look back on this week's episode of True Detective and provide our thoughts and analysis, plus the top listener emails for the week. So this week was the premiere and a double presentation of the first two episodes. The first episode, The Great War and Modern Memory, and episode 2, Kiss Tomorrow Goodbye. Guys, what did you think?
It took me about 7 minutes in before I could relax, sit back, and say, it's all going to be okay.
It's funny because the King Bee saw the first two episodes in an advanced screening that HBO put on at Alamo Drafthouse. And based on his reserved response to it, I was a little nervous. I was like, is he just being nice about it? Turns out, like, I would have been far more exuberant about this return in season 3. I'm super excited.
Yeah, in season 2, one of the problems I had was it seemed over stylized. They were trying to have the visuals just pop. This is much more subdued. The 1980s scenes, there's something the way they process the film that gives it this genuine 80s vibe. When you watch it about 10 minutes into it, I feel like I'm in the 80s. It's a quality production, and it's not trying to be something that it's not. It's HBO at its best.
Yeah, one of the temptations right now in 2018, 2019 is present the 80s as like, hey guys, look at how 80s this is. I think Stranger Things is a prime example of that. This show did a great job of making it the 80s, much like they did with season 1, of giving us a time frame, but not making it the star of the show. That kind of applies to the entire show as far as doing everything in a muted, almost a fatigued way, right? This is, there's no jump scares in this. It just is ominous to begin with. And one example that I found was when they approached race. It's 1980, you're in Arkansas, you know that race is going to play a factor. But in season 2, you would have had Vince Vaughn make a big speech about race. In this case, there was a simple question that was presented as, how is it here? And that's all you need to know. You understand that these are two black characters. We're smart enough to figure it out. It was subtle. It was classy. I'm just loving the start to season 3.
I couldn't ask for something better. You know, I feel like right now there's just nothing on TV. And as a result, people are really reaching out and going, oh, have you watched Schitt's Creek? It's great. And it's just trash. So finally, there's premium TV that's actually a premium and not just a throwaway that was finally picked up by TBS, the superstation.
You know, one of our other fears was, are they going to go back to season 1's nonlinear structure of telling the story, where it was going to jump back and forth? And that can go one of two ways. It can be great like season 1, or it can be, not so good like season 2 of Westworld with Bernard, where they use the Bernard, his memory issues and the jumping back and forth in time as more of a gimmick. And it's a lazy plot device that's trying to mask things. They're trying to keep you from seeing really what the end game is. In this, we're 2 episodes in, but I actually feel like the nonlinear style and the jumping back and forth enhances the story. It's not just a gimmick, and I'm much more relaxed and ready to just not know what's going on, but know that there's actually some reveal at the end, and it's not just something to be like, oh, did you watch True Detective? Wow.
one thing that I think everyone watching the show really needs to do to maximize the enjoyment out of it is step away from that sort of fandom compulsion that we're all having to compare this to what came before. You know, we're all looking immediately for parallels between season 1 and season 2 and other premium TV offerings like, you know, Westworld and these sort of non-linear mysteries or riddles. We're really cheating ourselves out of something here by not just taking a breath and enjoying this detective story for what it is. So my advice to everybody, just relax. Sometimes a coffee mug is just a coffee mug.
And as we're talking about words of advice to people, I would also say just let the show be the show. You know, let the detectives be the detectives. You don't have to be the detective. One of the biggest mistakes I made since watching these 2 episodes, which impressed the hell out of me, was jumping into Reddit just to see what the buzz was about. People are already going as far as looking at cast lists for episodes later in the season to see who's going to be around to try to narrow down the list of suspects. That's disgusting, guys. I don't think it's even about who did it so much as what is the story around these characters.
That's disgusting. I wouldn't go that far, but yeah, what makes True Detective great is it's not even the crime. Yeah, that's the background to it, but it's the relationship between the detectives and how they get there. So it's not the actual crime and solving it. Yes, I have to back myself off sometimes because I'm looking for it. I'm like, okay, where's the misdirect? Okay, no, that guy's too obvious. No, it could be him, or who's that character in the back looking shady? So we're all guilty of it, and you just got to try. And I'm going to try to just sit back and not break down every little thing we see on screen.
You make some great points, Big D. Why don't we jump into the suspect list now?
Good idea, King B. The suspect list. So we're not going to get away from this episode of Shat on TV without talking about the whodunit aspect. So we might as well get it out of the way early on. Episodes 1 and 2 present us with a litany of suspects, some more peculiar than others. Let's start with the creepiest, Cousin Dan, the peeper.
Well, I'm just glad that we got 2 episodes this week. If we didn't get episode 2, that helped us narrow it down. It gave us some information. We know somebody's going to be wrongfully accused. There's some clues that lead you to believe there's more than one person involved. If this was just episode 1, we would have spent 45 minutes breaking down the suspect list. But the first one on the list, obviously, you're talking about the most creepy, is Cousin Dan. He's the most compelling. He's the one who we're obviously supposed to believe could have done it. He is Will and Julie's uncle. To establish early on that the Purcell family, the previous summer, had him staying with them in Will's bedroom. He leaves a couple Playboys under the bed. They find a peephole in the closet during the investigation that goes right into Julie's room. Could be him, could not be him. But regardless whether he's guilty or not, this guy is a pervert.
What's funny about that is the King B, we're watching the episode and he goes, how do you, as a detective, not just start beating the shit out of this guy? And I'm like, hold on now. We don't know that he drilled the peephole. We don't know that it was him per se.
Well, I'm pretty confident that it's not him for one reason. I'm a tall guy. I'm 6'6". I would have drilled the hole somewhat at my eye level. I purposely watched, and you had to bend down. I think that peephole was at little boy level.
Well, here's the thing, though, is that if you're spying on little girls, you would drill the hole lower, wouldn't you?
No, but no. Obviously, he's rubbing one out while he's doing this, right?
So he said, yeah. So he has a chair in there.
Oh no! Come on, no, he's not going to be like bending over. I would swab the wall for DNA. There has to be a sample there.
So be sure and keep an eye on Twitter, where we're going to post some photo diagrams of how we would drill holes in little girls' bedroom walls. No, you know what? I think that this guy is just one of the many ways they're going to illustrate that this case has a lot of moving parts. He's not the guy. He is a garden variety pervert pedophile, but he just doesn't have the ingredients to inspire the level that this case is going to get to. He's really just there as sort of a distraction to really further illustrate that the whole scene is ugly here.
I just really liked his coat.
It was a nice, cool coat.
All right, with Cousin Dan out of the way, we move on to the teenagers who, are going to be obvious suspects because we see them with the bicycle at the playground, which kind of pins them in there. You also see them double back on the road and take a look at the kids as they're riding their bikes up the road before they disappear, What do you guys think of the purple Volkswagen gang?
I think Freddie Burns and his crew, it's far too obvious that they're going to be suspects. And they look guilty because they can't get their story straight. Now, that could be they're just 3 teenage nihilists sitting around in the bug, drinking beers or breaking bikes at the park. But they look guilty on all levels. They can't keep their story straight. And I think that they're going to be somebody to watch, that they have some information, because they're obviously not on the same page as to what went on. But do they really look like, child killers to you?
If 3 people tell the same story the exact same way, that's a lie. A little bit of variance is not that big a deal. And I think that Wayne does a good job of kind of parsing through what he thinks is the truth and what isn't. They talk about the different kinds of lies, right? And why somebody would lie and for what reason. I thought it was a really interesting part of the detective work.
So we know in that 1990 that the case is going to be potentially overthrown, that they have the wrong person. That leads me, and that the family is pushing for a retrial. Of all the suspects that we have here, the only ones that have a family that could support possibly pushing for a retrial would be one of the boys. So even though I don't believe that they're guilty, I think they're leading the way as, whoever is wrongfully accused.
I was really wondering who was in prison the first run through that I watched these episodes. And then as I started to kind of whittle away who I thought it might be, I figured maybe it is these guys. The writer Pizzolatto has borrowed a lot from true life stories and true crime and other fictional works. When I first saw this, immediately just thought of the West Memphis 3 and their whole story. And I go, oh, he's just going to retell the West Memphis 3 story. And that's all this is going to be about. I hope that it adds up to more than that this is more just a way to kind of illustrate the style of story they're going to tell. Knowing that the kid was seen playing with the bicycle, they're going to fingerprint that bike. It's most certainly a lock that these are the guys that take the fall for the crime.
Okay, so we've gone through, Cousin Dan, the purple Volkswagen gang. The one suspect that's presented that I just do not think could be the guy is the convicted pedophile that they go out and find. Namely, because even the detectives are like, dude, this is not the guy. After bracing him, they figure out it just doesn't hold up. And honestly, it seemed like it was a waste of time from the start.
Yeah, but that could be a classic misdirect. In season 1, we didn't meet the actual killer until midway through the season. It would be ironic if they present the pedophile here early on and we all just discount him. Oh, it can't be him. That if it comes back later on, that you had the right guy from the beginning.
I don't think that's the case. I know it was kind of hard to pick up from the dialogue, but when they've got him in the trunk of the car, they just say, "Hey, we're going to lock him up. He's going to miss his parole. He's going to do the rest of his sentence." These are 2 guys who, regardless of whether or not this guy did the crime, they're going to fuck him up. Just like early in the episode when they said, "Hey, let's go beat the shit out of somebody." These are 2 guys that are just going to go put justice out on the street their way.
One of the complaints I do have about True Detective, Pizzolatto said that he didn't feel like either detective was a bad guy in season 1. He said they're both kind of heroes. I don't buy into this. Like, I don't buy into grabbing a guy who has a record as a pedophile, beating the shit out of him, threatening him, locking him in a trunk. Like, that is just not okay with me. And I got to say that as an audience member, I've already written both of these guys off as bad people.
No.
Like, there was that whole idea that, the detectives, that they're the bad men who keep the other bad men away. That's what Rust says in season 1. I don't buy it. I think it's just how they justify their own actions. These are horrible people.
I mean, by today's standards, yeah, absolutely horrible people. But I think that back in the day, the small town justice, that's just kind of how things were sorted out. And it's ugly, as we're going to see later in the next few episodes. But I don't know that it necessarily makes them bad people. It's just they know the world they live in, and they're going to find their own balance for that.
At first, I agreed with you. When we see them at the quarry shooting at the rats, they're drinking. I was thinking these guys aren't the perfect cops, that these guys are going to turn out to be dirty. But when we see their work ethic, they're busting their ass. He's out there at night. He's tracking. They're looking for clues. They're actually, canvassing the area. They seem to be taking the case serious. And whether or not they have some issues with some, moral problems, like, is it wrong to beat if you worked these jobs and you saw the things that cops did and you saw enough dead bodies and enough kids that were molested, I can't blame them. I'm not going to get up on a soapbox and preach. I probably would have been there with them beating the piss out of this dude.
I mean, remember Marty Hart's words from season 1, it takes a lot of types to be a good detective. You've got the man possessed by ungovernable rage. You've got the football player, and each one of them could be a good detective or they could be a complete shitheel.
As I mentioned, I don't think the pedophile was the guy who did it. I do think that one of the strongest suspects in any time a kid goes missing is one of the parents, especially when those parents are not getting along. There are some gaps and erratic behavior in Tom Purcell's narrative in the first 2 episodes. Do you guys think Tom Purcell, the father of Will and Julie, or at least Will, could be responsible?
As far as outstanding performances go, I think Scoot McNairy in these first 2 episodes, he plays that tormented father so well. Even as an actor, I'm believing he could not have anything to do with this, let alone if he was the real father. That suffering, that torment, that distraught, he's at the end of his rope. He's ready to kill himself, essentially. As a cop, you got to believe that rings true. You see these cases and you pull 1,000 people over. You can tell when that one person's a bit off. To me, Tom rings 100% true, that he has no idea what happened to his kids and he really wants to find them. It seems genuine.
My Scoot McNairy, he wouldn't take a role where he would end up being the killer. It would be really disingenuous and faulty for that turnaround to take place. It would make a lot of scenes kind of a useless waste of time rather than a misdirection.
The people in the small town, they don't treat him when he goes back to work like the grieving father. They seem to have some questions about why are you back at work? They're not the most supportive bunch. And then in the final flashback or flash forward in episode 2, when he's, having one of his episodes, he gets out of the car, we see the Purcell house is burned down, which could potentially have been caused by, at some point, the town folk believed the father or a member of the family had something to do with it and went and burned the house down.
To be fair, this is Arkansas, and this is like 35 years later. I think houses just burned down. It's Arkansas. All things aside, I just want to say that Scoot McNairy's mustache made me really regret shaving mine. That is a piece of work on his face, a piece of art. And it was kind of great, talking about the 80s again. One of the ways that I really feel that they did a great job portraying that is just the way that he lives his life. I remember my friends' dads, my uncle, like that's what you would do, right? 4:00 in the afternoon, you're working on the car a little bit, having a beer, listening to the radio, listening to the baseball game until it gets dark. And it brought back a lot of nostalgia for me without being overboard, like, again, a Stranger Things. Anyway, now let's get to one of the characters that I feel might be one of the more tragic and unfortunate characters in season 3. It's the trash man, the garbage man, Brett Woodard. He already seems to be a suspect among the town folk, which is never a good thing to be. And also being a veteran and native doesn't seem to be playing in his favor in this case.
No, and the town folk seem to be suspicious of him strictly because he's a Native American guy. They don't even know the backstory. And even though he is a veteran who's come home and had some difficulties, he makes it clear in the interview. He said, I'm not one of those guys who's out getting high. I don't go out and rough people up. Even though he's dealing with the issues and the post-traumatic stress disorder that he's come back from Nam with. Yeah, granted, he's living in life in squalor. He's a bit of a hoarder and he's eccentric. He doesn't come across to me as a killer, but there's a 95% chance in my book that the town folk, this is going to lead to something tragic. And I agree with you, Gene, that there's no doubt that he is going to be the most tragic figure that we see in the beginning of this season.
When I watched this in theaters, this was probably one of my favorite scenes, the interview scene with this guy. I thought his performance was really genuine. I think that the character dynamics that were going on were really interesting. I feel like when they ask him if he likes kids and he kind of blows up at him a little bit, they look at him with pity, and maybe I'm reading into it, but instantly they know this isn't their guy, but they're still going to let him talk because that's what a detective does. And just the look in Mahershala Ali's eyes as he's relating his experience, he says, "Hey man, I don't ask those questions. I just put on my shirt and I just do my job." And he sees this guy who feels the exact same things he probably feels, who just isn't dealing with it in the same way. And I feel that there's probably as much sympathy as he's able to give another person. It's all there. And he just wants to hear this guy talk and understand, and maybe kind of share that sentiment with him. I believe that the whole town is going to have it in for this guy out of fear and ignorance. And as far as I know, this guy just isn't going to make it past episode 4.
I did want to give kudos to the actor Michael Greyeyes for his portrayal. One of the things I really appreciated about it was every time you get that, and unfortunately it is a stereotype at this point, the native veteran, you're going to get this guy who you're talking to him and he does this slow voice like this. And he says something sage and profound. And I love the fact that he was a quick talking, intelligent voice there. And this is a normal person. And knowing that that is not how everybody speaks from the res, it was nice to just see a character that was a little more normalized. I do think that aside from race, just his behavior also, anybody who doesn't know a guy who's cruising around slowly in a cart with a bunch of trash in the back of it, he's going to seem suspicious. And I don't blame people for at least suspecting him at first. This is a guy that's roaming around looking through people's garbage. He seems to be a bit suspicious. I did find it odd that he's been around for so long, years, and now he's a suspect. It seems a bit like people are jumping to conclusions.
Yeah, I think there's something in his performance. He's embarrassed of the state of his life. And he has a line there where he says, I want to be somebody who means something again. I want to have a purpose to my life. There's a sadness in his portrayal and his character that just really grabbed me. And I just hope that the neighbors, because the entire town is paranoid now, that they don't find a girl's bicycle in his pile of scrap, because he's around picking up metal. I was looking at his cart to see if there's a bicycle in there. It'll take one paranoid neighbor to look out the window, see a girl's bike in the heap, and be like, oh, he's the one who did it. And a lynching just breaks out. You know what? You just predicted it. That's exactly how it's going to happen.
All right. While we're gazing into Big D's crystal ball, do you have any other suspects that you want to pull out of the ether?
No, I think the actual person behind it, or persons, it's got to be somebody we haven't met yet. In season 1, Pizzolatto, he made us wait until halfway through the season until we saw, the Lawnmower Man. So unless he's doing, again, a double misdirect and saying, hey, your first suspect is the actual one, the good chances we haven't seen who's actually behind it yet.
I thought it was peculiar that, when they had the sketch of all the houses that were hit by the kids on the night of Halloween, not that that's an exact pointer to who it would be, but I think it does narrow it down to, someone in the neighborhood and not some sort of outside force there. But, they were adamant about saying that it wasn't necessarily picked up while trick-or-treating at a house. So it could have been anyone who intervened. So you have the two ghosts who give the doll to Julie. And so it also implies that, there might be more than one person.
Yeah, I don't know anybody who hasn't worked with kids. This is going to sound fucked up, but one person to kidnap 2 children and wrangle them and get them into a car and subdue them, it wouldn't be that easy. It's hard enough chasing my daughter around. That's one of them. You get 2 of them, they go 2 different directions. There's got to be more than one person.
Well, the notion that the wealthy and powerful have been preying on the poor for their nefarious pleasures without consequence is a regular theme in this show in the past 2 seasons. So you guys are absolutely right. We have not met the killer yet. And I'm sure that it's more than just a singular person. It's definitely going to be part of some network. And I guess we just have to wait and find out.
I want to talk a little bit about just the quality of the show this season. And it goes beyond just, beautiful cinematography of the settings. It goes beyond a sweet ass cop car. It goes beyond excellent makeup work. I thought that Mahershala Ali looked legitimately like an old man in the 2015 scenes. Great job through all of that. I want to get into some of the scenes that I really appreciated and some of the ways that they shot things. And one of the things that I really love about season 1 and again, I think it comes back in season 3 in a strong way, is these interviews and the portrayal of memories done a little bit differently this time. There are little nods, not Star Wars level, but little nods that fall just short of fan service in the way the director and writer are approaching season 3. You remember in season 1, they had the big hug mug that Matthew McConaughey was drinking out of, which I really want, and I think that can be found online.
$22 plus a little shipping will get you a big hug mug off most eBay and Etsy style sites.
And for just $5 at host@shadontv.com, I will send you a shiny black mug. So where season 1 used the interviews to kind of walk us through the mind and the workings of these two characters, Rust and Marty, season 3, I think, does a good job of working through the nature of memories. And they reveal a lot along the way. But what I thought was most striking about these performances in the interviews was Mahershala Ali's ability to convey emotion and take us from setting to setting and really feel what he was going through. When he's talking about his wife, which we don't know exactly what happened there, and we know that she went on to be a successful author, that they did have children together, the emotional connection that he uses to refer to her, I noticed, and Carrie was watching with us, she noticed as well, was it summoned up more sympathy and empathy from us as viewers than anything in season 2 did. Season 2, you had these extensive talks about between Frank and Jordan about, we got to have a baby. I want to have a baby. And I felt nothing toward those. This, he just mentions his wife and you're feeling it. His mentions of war, his mentions of his memories, I think were just really, really strong in these interviews.
Usually conversations you have in real life are subtle. They're not verbose. They're not these pretentious, conversations from season 2 that go on for 2 and 3 minutes. He walks into the kitchen. I think it's in the 1990s. And he's just found out that Julia's still alive. She thinks he's drunk. And she says, hey, you're kind of out of it. You can't do this in front of the kids. You didn't need a 5-minute speech. It's real subtle. Their relationship and the way that they interact, there's a genuineness to it that gives the entire plot and all the characters a feeling that they're grounded in reality.
I got the same vibe. I thought watching their kind of first date and their interactions once they're together really provided a 3-dimensional look at these people. In the beginning when she just kind of looks to him and she's kind of just scanning the depths of this pretty intense dude to figure out what he's all about. And then later, just the support that she offers him. She understands that the guy has some issues and carries some baggage, and she's there to pick up the slack. But at the same time, she has expectations. I love both of these actors together, and I hope we get to see more of them throughout the show.
Yeah, wouldn't it be a bitch if that's the only scenes they have together? The rest of the season, they're just like, well, that was a great
she's
performance.
Dead. What?
Yeah.
She's dead.
What do you want?
We got a picture on the wall. She's dead.
One of the things they do in these interview scenes too is with the flashing back and forth of time, the audio from one scene will lead to another, or like a video trick. So you see a scene where Mahershala Ali as Wayne Hayes is looking into a puddle and the moon goes out and it's the lighting during the interview, or he'll say something to himself in a mirror, but he's actually saying it in 2015. I thought it was a pretty cool trick, an interesting way to flash back and forth. Did you guys like it? Was it distracting?
No, I liked it, but it just had me worried that as a non-reliable narrator, I'm questioning what we're seeing. Is how much of this is real memory and how much of this is just a manifestation of his false memories. It's got me scared.
My personal theory is that Mahershala's character has done something, or he's hiding something. He knows that he has done wrong, and he knows that his current mental state has really put him at risk. His little pep talk in the morning about remember the nightstand if you need it, keep notes, pay attention. Yeah. He knows he's got his wife's book as a backup for safe facts. One of the time jumps, when they are looking through the trash man's house, and he looks in the mirror and says, I don't want to do this anymore. It's in the moment that he's being asked about this case, and he's recalling his experience, especially with the trash man. And I think that would lead him to then recall where that leads and realize, hey, this isn't fun. I'm not into this. I want to stop now.
Yeah, I assume that I think a lot of people did, that he's embarrassed about his current mental state, that he's hiding things to not let on to how much memory he's lost. And if they're questioning, they're policing the case and trying to maybe portray them as the ones who caused this case to either go unsolved or to be solved incorrectly. Later on, the documentarian, when she's doing the interview, they allude that there is a high body count associated with the case. So something goes on beyond the kidnapping and the one murder that could definitely be, King B, well put, that he's actually hiding something. It's not out of embarrassment.
Back in 1990, 3 people dead would be considered a high body count. We're not talking 2018 high body count.
No, but remember, this is during the 2015 interviews.
Oh, you're right.
So she's saying high body count. That's like twofold.
Yeah, it's at least 40 people.
Yes. Somebody burned the school down. This is something bad's going to happen.
All those theories on the transitions make perfect sense. I came up with 3 ideas that would explain it if they're actually using it as a plot device. One is that they did studies when they're trying to figure out how dreams are impacted by real life. And one of the things that they did was scientists, they put red filtered glasses on people and had them wear them around all day and then saw if that impacted their dreams. And what people reported was that, yeah, my dreams, I was dreaming in red. So it's clear that, or if you can think about, not even an experiment, what happens to you, right? You ever been sleeping and a song comes on and your alarm clock maybe, and you hear it and it works its way into your dream, or maybe you dream you're peeing and then you are peeing your bed. That sort of thing is that linkage. It always coincides with dreaming. And so it could be that this is a dream, which would be super lame. Don't want to see that. St. Elsewhere type shit. We don't need it. Another possibility is that these are mental fabrications, right? That he is, as King B alluded to, trying to cover up, maybe even in his own head, that Wayne is trying to cover up these memories that he can't bear to remember, something horrible that he did. And then finally, another possibility entirely is that he's making these stories up on the spot as coverage. And so it's his imagining of the way things go for his narrative in order to fool, documentarians or anything else. It could be all those things. It could be nothing. For me, it was just a really enjoyable artistic flair, and it lent to the spookiness of it, right? Again, anytime you have those breaks from reality and then quick shifts, it lends to an air of discomfort. And I really like that. I like that discomfort. Another scene that I really enjoyed was when he went into his wife's office, or I guess it was their shared office, and he's going through and you see all these items, the typewriter, that eagle bust, all the books and stuff like that. It gave me that feeling of what it must be like to be that, old detective, that old person with all these stories to tell, and be in a room surrounded by your things, right? Like all these memories around you. But they focused in on his wife's book, the Harvest Moon book. He mentioned that he hadn't read it all, or that he'd recently just read it all for the first time. Like, how much of that is influencing his interview? If your memory is going, but you have a document there, is that seeping into your narrative, right? Is that becoming the record that you're going to?
Well, he said he hasn't read it. He still has not read it completely. So I don't know how much of it could be seeping in, but there's a good potential that he's not reading it, not out of the facts of the case, but possibly her not being around could have something to do with writing the book. There's something, she could have easily become entangled in it. You're dealing with a kidnapper, somebody who's still alive. It's not out of the realm of possibility that she could be pulled into it, that she could become a victim of the crimes that she was writing a book about. Even though I know she's written 5 books, it's still potential somewhere along the way. And that would explain why the daughter blames him for possibly getting the mother killed or getting her involved in the case to begin with.
I think that alienation between the father and the daughter is going to be way more unpleasant than that.
Getting mom killed? Worse than that?
Yeah, I don't want to really share because I hope it doesn't go that way. But I think we're definitely in store for a lot of ugliness. Episode 4 is going to be a banger for sure.
That is ugliness. Banger? It sounds dirty.
Maybe the way you do it.
It's what the kids call cool stuff now, Big D.
Yeah, so one other thing I thought of as we're watching the interviews here and the documentary that's being created in 2015, and King B had mentioned this, early on in the cast about Paradise Lost and about the West Memphis 3. So I just wanted to kind of give a background on that so people see some of the parallels between the 1996 documentary. It was Paradise Lost, The Children's Murder at Robin Hood Hills. And it's about a triple murder in Arkansas where they charged these teenagers who were later known as the West Memphis Three for murder. And it actually, in the documentary, they cover that it was a complete miscarriage of justice, that it was a mix of coercive police tactics, incompetent defense attorneys, and a presumption of the community that went just horribly wrong. So the documentary and the two subsequent sequels helped raise public awareness of the case, and it eventually led to a successful plea deal. And the West Memphis Three were finally exonerated and released from prison in 2011. And they'd served 18 years in jail for murder. So there's a parallel between Paradise Lost and season 3 that has me a little bit worried. Both of them open with shots from a helicopter over a wooded area where a murdered child has been discovered. Both have a group of 3 teen outcast suspects. One of them is questioned in True Detective for the Black Sabbath t-shirt. And I think it's a clear reference to the Satanic Panic in the 80s. And that actually was the backbone of the West Memphis 3 case, Satanism. But mostly the two different stories are bound by their environment. They happen in a mostly white area, poverty-stricken community that's reckoning with this hidden, violence amongst the town folk. And I'm worried. We're assuming that season 3 is going to be a clear-cut whodunit, missing child, murder, with the parallels being drawn between the West Memphis 3 and the story that we're seeing here with the Purcells and the missing children. I'm a little worried it could be more about the larger cover-up and the outrage, for the miscarriage of justice than it is a straightforward crime mystery.
The parallels are too strong to ignore. And Pizzolatto also, as we'll get into when we get to the watch, which is our fan emails and tweets, he is not afraid to bring in outside references to accelerate the plot, right? Basically, if he gives you some allusions to things that happen in real life or allusions to something that happened in literature, then that can tell its own story or give you a framework to work on so you don't have to spend so much time. Again, we're talking about getting into intense detail in the show, but also wrapping it up in a season. And really the only way you can do that is spend time on the detail and then zip through the macro view of things.
Let me give you guys a dose of Raj real quick. Which would you rather? Go to jail for 20 years for a horrible crime you didn't commit, or just get hit by a bus on the first day of court and die?
Well, I would take anything over death.
Yeah, same.
Really?
Because at least you have a chance. Yeah, but 20 years of being wrongfully accused, I don't. How do you not go insane? Because in prison it's like Andy in Shawshank. Oh, everybody in Shawshank's innocent. Nobody believes you, and that has to be maddening, especially if you're charged with a child's murder. It's got to be a shitty existence.
That's what I'm saying.
I would never choose the bus. Never.
But when you come out of jail, like, what sort of life are you going to have after that? And 20 years of that is going to change you so systemically. It's just not worth it. I'm 38 years old now, I think. To give up 20 years for a crime I didn't, just kill me now. Just hang me and get it over with.
Okay, here's why that's a bad choice. If you get hit by the bus, that's it. Go to jail. Maybe 2 years in, you say, the bus might have been the right way to go. Then just shank yourself.
That's a way worse way to go. Once you're in prison, the ways out are way worse than getting creamed by a bus.
Titties and beer, man. I would stick it out for titties and beer, Xbox, pizza. There's lots to live for.
Yeah, U.S. prison I don't think would be that bad. It's not like I'm going to a Turkish prison.
I bet some U.S. prisoners would argue that point with you. But anyway, just something to mull over.
Watch Midnight Express. Prison in the 80s. Ooh.
So getting back to the murder and the kidnapping and the cover up, if there is a cover up, what makes it really interesting is that there is a loose end here, right? It's Julie, in the sense that in previous seasons, if somebody's dead, they're just dead. But here you have one of the kids we now know has survived at least until 1990, unless someone's running around with their fingers. Possibility that could be the key that blows everything up. I think that the inventiveness of the story goes way beyond just copying a crime that has already been in the news. Something really, really special is going to happen this season.
Well, the town is called West Finger, so that's surely going to be an Easter egg for future developments.
Imagine seeing like they're dusting for prints at the CVS, and it's little tiny hands.
I always knew that they took your fingerprints as an adult, but as a child, you'd think that they would change just in magnitude.
I read somewhere that koala fingerprints are indistinguishable from human fingerprints.
Mm.
Did they say, though, why her fingerprints were in the system?
Yeah, so basically what happened was in 1990, they entered, they took a backlog of fingerprints from all, victims.
But that's what I mean. A 10-year-old girl isn't getting fingerprinted.
They used her prints from when the crime happened, from when she was abducted.
How did they get her print? She's abducted.
Off of her stuff in her room.
They didn't keep her sealed in a plastic Tupperware.
No, I was thinking okay, we got to cut that. I was thinking like you take your kid to go get, like they used to have those certificates in case your kid got missing, had a picture and fingerprints.
No, we got to leave that in. People need to know you don't let your kids touch things.
So cover up or not, murder for sure. We've got a lot of clues that were kind of floating around in these first two episodes, and I want to just kind of go through them, sift through them, see what you guys think. So first, we kind of discussed a little bit before. If you had to make a guess, who will they pin this crime on?
Oh, with the West Memphis 3. Those 3 like VW knuckleheads. It's not going to take too much to get one of those guys to flip and say another guy did it. They're easy to pin on. Plus, it makes sense with the 1990 family pushing for them to be exonerated.
King B?
I think something horrible is going to happen to the trash man. And as a result, the higher ups are going to say, you need to close this case now, grab those kids and get them.
So you're also going with the West Memphis 3, the VW bug gang?
Those kids are going down.
I'm going to go out on a limb and actually say that it's Cousin Dan. I think they're going to go after Cousin Dan. And the family is going to, the broader family from Lucy's side is going to come to his aid or demand an exoneration. But you guys are probably right. I just want to spread the possibility that we might be correct.
Exactly.
Okay. The next question I had was about Will's body. So we saw a lot of the corn husk dolls, which, by the way, I looked them up. Native American origin. Sorry, trash man. You're in a lot of trouble right now. But Will's body was found in the cave, lying prostrate in like a praying position. Then we see the note that the Purcells receive, presumably from the killer or Julie's abductor, that says, basically that children should be happy and left alone. Do you think that this ties to a desire to keep children forever innocent? Or did you see any symbolism there?
Yeah, it's a misdirect. We know that Julie had those 2, that somebody was giving them out at Halloween. Somebody is trying to make it seem like there is more behind this crime. We now know that Julie is living in 1990. She's alive and well. She's not being held captive in some dungeon. She's out at CVS. She probably knows her abductor. Well,
CVS sometimes can be a dungeon.
Okay. So I think it's a possibility that they wanted to make this murder seem like it was tied to the occult. So they reference another similar murder in the episode. So I think the way you throw the police off your scent that it's a family member, throw out the dolls that Julie collected on Halloween, put them in a position where people are going to question, is there true meaning behind it? Whereas it's just a way to distract the police from really what's going on.
3 or 5 times a year, me and Gene will go on some outdoor outing, usually shooting or, some kayak thing. And invariably, in the course of a long day, I always find a nice, warm, flat rock. I like to stretch out and just lay on the ground for 30, 45 minutes and have a little nap. So when they find the kid just, laying down with his hands folded across his chest, I didn't see anything abnormal about that at all. That's how you lay on the ground. If there was a writer's strike and they had called me in to write the show after this episode, I would say that the little girl is in on her abduction. Maybe she's manipulated somehow. And she shared that information with one of her little friends in school. And the note that shows up was actually created by one of the school friends and mailed to the house.
Hence the misspelling. I noticed that one of the things the cops were kind of onto, and I thought as well, is that the children might have been lured. There's a couple of clues that point to that. One is that they said they were going to the park to see this dog, But the kid who had the dog didn't have any plans to meet up with them, right? So they were dishonest with their father as far as their reason for leaving the house, right? They said they were going to the park to see the dog. Secondly, is that Will had a backpack on with, and it seemed pretty full. So I don't know if he was planning on being gone a while. I don't know about you, but when I was a kid, if I was going to go ride my bike to go see like some dog at the park, I'm not taking a full backpack, right? I'm just getting on my bike and going. We didn't have a lot of shit to carry on. I didn't have an iPad or a laptop or a Nintendo Switch or a full can of pasta sauce. I thought that was a little bit odd too. And then also just the fact that that they clearly were going somewhere, it seemed farther than expected. I mean, they left the house at 4:00. They're supposed to be back by 5:30. Like, how quick a turnaround were they looking at? It just seems to add up to the kids going to meet somebody or do something that they did not want their dad to know about.
Yeah, I think Chris Henson's going to break the case when they catch one of the neighbors with box wine, duct tape, and condoms.
Well, that got weird.
Did they have box wine back then?
As you're saying that, I don't want the tinfoil hat, but I really want to put it on. Could the sister be involved? Could the brother have been the one really looking through the peephole? Did she set him up and that she wasn't kidnapped? She just went off on her own with her older boyfriend. Yes, all those things are possible, Gene.
Did Will look really small to you for an 8th grader?
Is he in 8th grade?
That's what they said. Yeah, so they say when they go to the school, he's supposed to be in 8th grade. I was like, I thought he was like 9 years old. 8th grade.
No, and the teacher makes a point to say how sensitive he is, how quiet he is. Maybe there's a darker side to him than we think.
Speaking of which, can we talk? She's a shitty teacher. Amelia is a shitty teacher. I mean, aside from the poetry and all that, she's out on the playground and she sees a kid getting bullied and just turns around and walks away. I was like, oh, she's going to go confront this kid. Nah, I don't give a shit.
But she's so good looking.
You just like her hair.
I like those big brown eyes. They're beautiful.
All right. So another clue that they found at the house that I wanted to get into is the books on Will's dresser. So you see a scout handbook, but you also see another book aside from the Playboys that's called The Forests of Lang. And Forests of Lang is supposed to be an official Dungeons and Dragons book, but it's not actually like in real life. So I looked up Lang and tried to figure out what that it's about. And Lang appears in, I believe, the Lord of the Rings and also in some Stephen King stuff. But it's kind of that Lovecraftian concept and best described as like this isolated island that is inhabited by a culture that worships the old ones. Again, kind of that Lovecraft old ones that we get into in the Mouth of Madness. And these old ones dwell underground in subterranean ruins and labyrinths. Carcosa, anyone? But it's like this fog shrouded place where old monsters live. And it's interesting that when Hayes finds the manual, then the scene immediately cuts to the cops searching in like this misty field, which is exactly what Lang is supposed to look like. We see like depictions of Lang. So I think that, again, we need to look at every little piece that we see in this season. Books are definitely placed specifically. And Ashley Schlafly, one of our listeners, got into the poem that's being read in class later and does a wonderful job. It'll be on this podcast later in this podcast, just kind of explaining how that gives us clues for the rest of the show.
So one of the remaining clues that I want to get some closure on is the kidnapper's note. So it read, "Do not worry. Julie is in a good place and safe. The children should," misspelled, "laugh, do not look, let go." So this could, and we have to believe that this is a genuine note from somebody who's involved, because we find out then later on in 1990 that she is alive. So it has a couple of ways it could go. To me, it could be the genuine kidnapper who has good intention for Julie saying to the family, "Don't worry, she's okay. Don't worry, we'll take care of her." Or is it somebody who is just trying to misdirect the family into thinking it is someone that they know that would care for her? And it's just, again, a misdirect.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, I thought the misspelling might have just been that cousin Dan ran out of Playboys to get letters out of, and so he was like, "Oh shit."
It could have been any of the adults at the welding shop.
The rest of the language is very simplistic. It's all very simple sentences. I feel like this is one of those things that looking back on it later in the season, we're going to go, oh my God, it was right there the whole time. But I haven't been able to figure this one out.
I think, didn't you say it sounds like it was written by a child?
Well, just, imagine as you read it out, imagine an 8-year-old kid writing a letter, do not worry, yada, yada, yada. Like, just the pacing of the sentences, it just seems very childish beyond an adult who would maybe be even a lazier speaker. Don't worry, she's fine. I think I might have snuck in and wrote the show for you. You're welcome.
So you think it's a runaway situation?
I think she's been manipulated. I wouldn't say it's as willing as a running away situation, because she's certainly not going to plot the death of her brother or be okay with it once it's happened. So, ultimately, who cares? Let's just find out.
One of the strengths of True Detective is its ability to weave a story beautifully, use exceptional cinematography, great performances. I feel like a great ending to this season would be no resolution at all, right? Is to let us really think about the nature of memories, the nature of storytelling, and how everything unfolds rather than who done it. Don't skip ahead in the book. So
why do I feel, Gene, like that whole thing there about don't try to nitpick, sit back, watch, no closure? I feel like that was aimed at me.
People came up with their whodunit theories with Game of Thrones, with Westworld, with American Gods. It's natural in a murder that we're going to want to try to figure out who did it. I would just say, let's do it based on what we see in the show. Don't spend all your time on that and miss the actual performances that are going on in front of you. And for God's sake, stay off Reddit, please.
I'm not Roger. I never go on Reddit.
I only go to one part of Reddit.
All right, and with that, let's move on to the watch. So if you would like to get your email read on the podcast, write us your thoughts at the watch. It's host@shatontv.com. We'll sift through them. All emails that are written into the watch will appear on the website, Shat on TV, and some will be read on the air as time permits. We have two. The first one comes from Ashley Schlafly, who's a regular writer into the show and regular friend on Twitter. And she just wrote in with her reflections after episodes 1 and 2. She's also explaining a lot about the poem that's being read in class at the school, so pay attention. The poem that Amelia reads from is written by Robert Penn Warren and entitled Tell Me a Story. Now, I think Pizzolatto might be hitting the nail a bit too on the head with this one. I actually audibly sighed in frustration as I began to recognize the prose because it is so obvious if you're familiar with the piece. Let's talk about why. In the second stanza of the poem, Warren writes, "Tell me a story in this century and moment of mania. Tell me a story. Make it a story of great distances and starlight. The name of the story will be time, but you must not pronounce its name. Tell me a story of deep delight." It's easy to see why this one is chosen when you think about Warren's poem and its famous connection to New Criticism. Basically, New Criticism was a movement where proponents tried to change the way close reading was done. Instead of considering a piece of literature among the greater body of writing that is out there and its orientation within such a body, instead, close reading or analysis is now meant to be done in isolation without regard for who the author was or who the subject was. And in essence, the writing is meant to be read and understood on its own and on its own merit. What bigger message can Pizzolatto be sending to those of us that almost left the series after season 2 than to say, hey, be objective. Don't read into this what you've seen before. Forget the fuck up that was season 2 and see this one for what it is, a something new, a non-fuck up. The issue, though, is that so much of these first 2 episodes felt like season 1. It is difficult to watch Ali's Wayne and not think of McConaughey's Rust. It's hard to watch Wayne's partner, a terribly wigged dwarf, without recalling Harrelson's Heart. Will it be different? I hope so. I really do. But so far, it looks a lot and feels a lot like season 1. Now, to give Pizzolatto some credit, there is something in the first stanza of Warren's poem that could speak to Ali's character. Warren writes of a time gone by and is reminiscent of wanting and hoping for the past. In a way, Ali's character Wayne is doing this. He is hoping for the past, not just to see his wife, not just to be with her and be young with his memories, but to have another chance, another opportunity to solve the crime with his full capacity. Still, I think it is more likely that Pizzolatto is being super meta here with regard to the audience, and it's pretty heavy-handed in my humble opinion. That being said, it leads me to a fear about this season, which is the weight of the ones that have come before it. I feel like a lot of what has never gone right for Pizzolatto still isn't fixed in these first 2, most specifically the need to develop the really wooden and one-dimensional women on screen beyond how they react to the men. There is time, though, and I hold out hope. My one request is that this season does not end with some pretty wrapped-up bow. I think one of the reasons the excellent series The Night Of worked better than season 2 and in some ways season 1 of True Detective is that it is devastating in its ending, in its honesty. Since we are dealing with some heavy themes such as racism in the South this time around, I am hopeful for an ending that respects the heaviness of the material. Only time will tell. I did enjoy this first outing, and Ali is just amazing. But I hope moving forward, things are a little more subtle and the mystery is allowed to be what it is, a whodunit that will have devastating and long-lasting consequences for all involved. You all are great, though, and I look forward to watching and analyzing alongside you this season. And that comes from Ashley.
Well, Ashley, you couldn't be more wrong. Again, I think that I have to caution everyone not to compare it too much to season 1 and 2. I would say that I don't believe Pizzolatto feels that season 2 was the failure that everyone else does. I think he may have some excuses for it, but ultimately I think he loves it far more than anybody else. As for drawing parallels between the two, I mean, I know why you would do it, but I don't really see that as the same thing. Mahershala Ali is sort of resigned and kind of keeps to himself. And Russ Cole, I remember he had once said, I sit in judgment. And I don't get that feeling from Mahershala Ali at all. On the other side, you've got Marty Hart, who's a very outgoing, sort of flippant character. And I can understand why you'd liken him to Stephen Dorff's character. They're just not the same personality-wise. I think that there's a more of a lackadaisical nature to Marty Hart's character than Dorff. He's a little bit darker. He's a little bit more base, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think Ashley can rest assured that we're not going to get the pretty ending. I think it's clear. In the 1990s, we've already seen they've gotten it wrong. It has destroyed the characters' lives. I anticipate that the ending, even 2015, it's not going to get any better. The bow's not going to get prettier. I think this is going to be the ending that she wants. That's maybe not the tidiest, not the cleanest. Maybe they don't even find out who did it. But I think it's the ride. It's not the mystery of who done it. It's the characters that keep us involved. And I just want her to really think about that. As an anthology, try to disconnect it. We're going to see parallels between all the seasons, but to enhance all of our viewing, it maybe would be better for us to just, even we should try in an episode to maybe just to, tune that out. Let's treat it on its own. Let's give it the respect that this one season deserves.
Now, part of an anthology, though, that we should acknowledge is the fact that although you can have a series or a book that is an anthology, has lots of different pieces that are put together, typically an anthology does have some sort of a common theme or a common motif, right? And so in this case, you do always have the partners, the cops, right, that are involved. There's always a mystery. So some things will be the same, and that's okay. It's the way that different people react differently, right? So these are different characters, and I do think it is interesting that you have these partners who are a bit different. But I think if we hadn't seen season 1 and you looked at season 3, you wouldn't think that Roland West and Wayne were that different. They're really not that different. In fact, they play off each other very well. There's a deep respect between the two detectives, and I really love that Stephen Dorff's performance. Even he doesn't try to upstage Mahershala Ali. He stays within the confines of his role, and then also as a detective, he has a deep respect for what his partner does. He brags about it. He's saying, "Yeah, this guy, is a lerp. This guy, I let him do what he wants." Even in that great scene when they're working with the kid, and Mahershala Ali does his lightsaber impersonation. It was that. The way they play off each other, they are a fine-tuned machine. I mean, these guys were great. And when there is that bit of tension, the King B and I were talking about that bit of tension about race, and the way they resolve it is so wonderful because it is, one, how two men would resolve it, and also there is a deep trust between the two of them that you see on display right there. Getting to other points, Ashley, I'm glad that you took the time to write this because it spared me the time. I was taking notes on this. It's like, oh shit, I got to spend my Monday diving into this prose and getting into what the point is. And I think that you did a wonderful job of summing it up. And please continue to write in. Fantastic work.
Yeah, and if you want to find or follow more of Ashley's work, you can follow her at the Dana Buckler. I feel almost like she's like our child. Like we kind of helped that happen. She wrote into us. We built a relationship, and then one day, Dana is one of my Florida neighbors. He put out that he was looking for a co-host, and I feel like we kind of we're like a dating app. Did we help that marriage come together?
Figurative marriage.
Yeah, well, they're again, they're in different states, but
well, we're also the godfathers to her baby.
That is true. She listened to our podcast while she was giving birth. So this is one big twisted podcast family, but she is excellent. Dana's excellent. Check them out at the Dana Buckler Show podcast, and we'll put a link in the notes.
All right, moving on from Ashley to Mitchell. Mitch writes, True Detective is back. I know it's early in the game and we have only seen 2 episodes so far, but I must say that the speculation was accurate. Season 2 has largely been put to bed and a return to form feels great in this, the latest iteration of True Detective. I'm curious to hear the Shat team's collective thoughts on last evening's events. For now, here's mine. Personally, I believe that Mahershala Ali's character has been really well written, and I think Ellie has done a great job so far portraying that thin line between mysterious, cold, compelling purple haze recon guy and everyday dad figure with 2 children, although something bad went down between he and his daughter, and a beloved school teacher, author, late wife. The setting just plain works for me. It's gritty, dark, spooky, and while it's no Louisiana, it somehow feels like it's haunted or cursed ground. Especially those shots at Devil's Den, the cave, and the final shot of the dilapidated house on Shoepick Lane all those years later, when Hayes is stumbling around in a dementia-ridden state in his bathrobe. As was said in the preview pods by the King Bee, regardless if the setting is the Ozarks, Louisiana, wherever, this storyline just works regardless of geographical delineations, thanks in large part to the creepiness of the story. I like the subtle details of the show so far as well. The creepy closet pinhole, presumably drilled by the cousin during his stay, was a unique add-in that will, I am sure, reunite us with the character down the road. The clever twist that the little girl's print showed up 10 years later is a curious bit of writing. I just hope they play it out well. And those fucking dolls, yikes. They're reminiscent of the stick bundles from season 1 for sure, but I have to say if I came across 2, let alone one of those fuckers in the wood, I would be gone. Very creepy and good idea. They also seem like something that Carrie Gross will let her cats play with. Just a thought. I have to say, I don't have any grand theories yet as to who done it, largely because we haven't been given enough. Definitely not the junk guy, though. His character should be recast as a candidate for Marie Kondo. If you don't know Marie Kondo, she's a tidiness lady. Throw it away if it doesn't bring you joy. Thanks so much for making the preview pods and for making the leap into the True Detective world. As you all may or may not recall, I'm a huge fan of the pod and listen to every offering. Save American Gods. Sorry, not sorry. You've built a great community, and any day or week I can listen to the Shat. Something is a good one. Best of luck in the new season. Looking forward to your announcement covering season 4 of The Good Place. It is so forking good. He also asks if we got 2 minutes to talk about the Game of Thrones new trailer and date drop. Wrong pod, I know, but do it for the thrones, Mitch.
Yeah, Mitch, thank you very much. We put a lot of time into it, and it's nice to know that you enjoy the work, and we appreciate you participating. I think, what was it? Was it April 14th?
Game of Thrones drop, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the trailers, unfortunately, I have not had a chance to really delve into. I've seen them once, but I know, like anything Game of Thrones, you need to go back and watch it 5 or 6 times to dissect it. I mean, I already heard that there's a huge debate whether or not, the Jon Snow statue is an older version of him, which shows that he has survived. And this was through one watch and just a couple tweets.
Yeah, Ashley posted that on Twitter as well. Like, is that an older Jon Snow? And I was like, it's a statue. Like, how accurate do you want it to be? It's a stone version of a man.
Have you seen the Ned Stark one?
Come on.
I wouldn't even know that was Ned Stark. It's pretty bad.
Have you seen the Cristiano Ronaldo one?
Yes, I have. Yes. It does not do that gorgeous man justice.
But yeah, getting back to your to your watch letter, Mitch, I agree that Mahershala Ali is, I mean, no doubt the star of the show, and the character is so well written. I think my only complaint about it, honestly, is the whole purple haze thing. Just really, it really bugs me. Not that he was called that in Vietnam, but that Roland West continues to call him purple haze. I'm like, can we drop that, please? I know it's the 80s, but come on. And as far as the overall vibe of the show, I agree that they did a great job. It's mostly seems to be shot in the dark, or at least most of the memorable scenes are. But they do a great job of showing that sort of run down corner, if not totality of Arkansas. I go back to Winter's Bone as one of my favorite movies to watch, and it also has that similar like darkness to it of this impoverished community. And what Amelia, the school teacher, said as well, though, is just like relating to the fact that the commonality, regardless of race, that everyone has is that they are poor. and I feel that that will have a bearing on the season. Pizzolatto has, as the King Bee alluded to, it is a class struggle is something that is ever present in this series, and so I'm looking forward to see what they do with it.
Workers of the world unite.
All right. Thanks, Ashley and Mitch, for writing in. That concludes this week's episode of Shat on TV True Detective. If you would like to write in, host at shatontv.com. Go ahead and get those letters into the watch for next week's episode, which will air next Tuesday after we watch episode 3. Be sure to follow us on social media and share with a friend. We're on Twitter, Snapchat, and Instagram at Shat on TV. Facebook, search for Shat on TV Podcasts. The website is shatontv.com. You can email us, hosts at shatontv.com, and wherever fine podcasts can be found, including iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, Pandora, Spotify, and YouTube. Be sure to subscribe, and if you stop by iTunes, please be sure to leave a review. That helps the podcast grow. Again, if you'd like to subscribe, you can hit us up at shatontv.com/subscribe, and that'll allow you to subscribe to any of our podcasts. And if you'd like to listen to our sister podcast, Shat the Movies, where we review 80s and 90s movies, our next one coming up will be The Burbs. On behalf of my co-hosts, Big D, Dick Ebert, and the King Bee, I'm Gene Lyons. Be sure to join us next Tuesday for episode 3 of True Detective.
Get those fucking dogs away from me.